I do want to say I'm glad you're here. All right, it's right here at the beginning of the year is one of those times where everybody tends to think about goals. And last Sunday, I talked about how to set goals, and I talked about how to do it in such a way that hopefully it's a little bit better than the average. If you're taking notes, let me give you a quick recap of some things from last week. If you're looking at your handout, 62% of Americans, that's over 180 million people, make New Year's resolutions at least sometimes. How many people made something like a New Year's resolution this year? You made, maybe it was on paper, maybe it wasn't, but you're like, I want to do I want to do this, and this year. Can I see your hands? Like 5 of you, great. Wow. The rest of you can go home, or maybe no, wait. You're the people who need to hear this message. All right. Let me just give you a little quote here just to start off with. If you keep doing what you always done, you keep getting what you always got. All right? If you're not really okay with where you are right now, if you're okay with where you are, carry on, my friend, carry on. But if you're a go-getter, and if you're a person who, maybe you're a person who's, have not been a go-getter, but I'm not okay with where things are in my life, in this area, in that area, my relationships, finances, goals, spiritual life, my relationship with the Lord, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. In that case, what are you going to do to change that? Because you know nothing changes automatically, right? Nothing changes automatically. We don't grow automatically, we die automatically. You got to do something to grow. To die, you don't have to do anything. Just sit there. Sit there. You'll die eventually. But if you're going to grow, you're going to have to eat. And if you're going to grow in other ways, you're going to have to make goals. You're going to have to think about it and do something to grow your goals. Maybe your goals, maybe they look like this. In January, that's everybody right there. That's 180 million people in January, right? The number one New Year's resolution is lose weight. Yep, exercise, lose weight. That's it. Here's February. Right? Right? That's the way we do it. We tend to be like, okay, man, I'm so focused. And then February looks a little bit more like that right there, right? It's treadmill in January is that, treadmill in February is that. So if that's you, what I want to ask this morning is there some way that we can turn up our willpower? Okay, is there some way we can grow? Is there some way we can make it different than it's been? Is there some way we can not fall off the bandwagon and lose what we said in a moment, hopefully, of clear thinking, we said we wanted to do? We felt like God wants me to do this, and then it didn't always happen. How many know what I'm talking about? I feel like in a moment, like in a service or at the end of a service, yeah, that's it. God wants me to do that. And then Thursday or 3 weeks later, it's just like, it's gone. Is there any way to change that? That's what this message is about. And hopefully we can do it. Okay, let's take some notes. I'm going to recap last week real quick. Ready? 62% of Americans make New Year's resolutions at least sometimes. Only 8% are successful. And another 24% sometimes are successful. So 8% are successful, another 24% on top of that are sometimes successful in making a change, making the changes they intended to. And people who make the goals are 10 times more likely to achieve the same level of success as those who don't make any. Now that ought to make everybody, frankly, if that doesn't make you want to say, I'm going to make some goals, I don't know how to help you. Okay, I got nothing. Right? No, seriously, you want to be successful in some area of your life. I'll be honest, I'm not that motivated by money. Ask my wife. I'm not. I'm just not that motivated by money. But I am motivated to do well in the work that God has called me to do. I'm motivated to do that. I am motivated to do well with my family. And my kids and my marriage. I'm motivated to do. I want to do well. I'm motivated to do well in accomplishing the things that I feel like God wants me to do. I'm motivated to get to know Him better. And if that's the case, if you have goals to say, maybe your goal is very simple. You're like, well, I want to read through the Bible this year. Okay, do you know how much you're going to have to read to do that? Okay. You know how often you're going to have to? Basically, you could read 4 pages a day. In most Bibles, you could read 4 pages a day and approximately, and you'd make it through in about a year, roughly. Okay? It's not, and that's true. It's not easy. And that's why we're talking about this, right? Because how do we get it in such a way that we do it? How do we get it so we turn the willpower up on high and say, I want to actually do it? Because it's not easy. You're right. None of the things, if you're setting easy goals that you can trip over, well, what's the, like, you're not going to have to jump to get over that one. I just do like that and I'm over it. No, I want to set something that I have to actually try. And to do that, we're going to have to try. We're going to have to get some willpower. So let's talk about how we do that. Last week, I talked about three principles. I'm just going to give you three principles of planning your goals. First of all was start with God. Okay, start with God. In other words, God rules, but you just plan. Okay, so you make your plan, but you always do it under His lordship. If your goal is to become something that God doesn't want you to become, then you need to change your goal. Right. That's what I mean. If your goal is to do something and God says, actually, I had this in mind, then that changes and you go over here. That's what starting with God means. And that's what most people miss. Most books on goal setting, most gurus out there that talk about goals on the internet, that's what they miss. They tell you look just inside. I want to tell you look up. Okay, look up. Don't just look inside. You need to look inside, but look up and say, God, what do you want me to do? Start with God. The second one is make it clear. Make it clear. Write them down. Write them down. If you don't have, by the way, that's the clearest way to the best way to make things clear that I've ever seen. Write it down. Just write it down. Because in your mind, it may be kind of fuzzy. Or maybe it's clear today, but tomorrow it'll be fuzzy. But if you write it down and write it as clearly as you can, in fact, I encourage you to write it down what they call SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable or attainable, relevant, something you really want, and time-based. How soon are you going to do this? When are you going to do it? By when? But you see what I'm saying? It's a different, making it clear. If you can make it really clear, it makes a difference. In fact, 66% more likely to achieve your goals just from that. Just from that one thing. All of a sudden, 66% more likely to achieve goals. That's based on a study that a university did where they compared 2 groups of people, and 66% more of the people who wrote down their goals accomplished their goals. So if you, let's bring it back home. If you say, my goal is to stop saying mean things to my wife, then you should write that down. And not just that, but what kind of mean things are we talking about? I have a couple of goals that I have on my prayer list where I write down a lot of my goals, which is where I am pretty sure that I'm going to see them again. I write them down on my prayer list because I'm going to go back, I'm going to pray over that, and so that way that's where I know where they are and I'll see them again. I have a couple of goals that involve not annoying my wife. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but I wrote down what it was that I wanted to do, what I wanted to change. I wrote down a couple of other things that regarded my family. Here's how specifically I want to behave. I want to capture meal times and use it for connection for my children and leading them spiritually. Does that make sense? So 1 meal a day, specifically. Yesterday I sat down, I went and had to find my Bible, and I couldn't find it anywhere, so thankfully I had the Bible app, and I said I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't find the Bible that I usually am used to using. So I pulled out my phone, I've got the Bible app on there, and I pulled up Proverbs chapter 1, and I read it, which we read it together at the dinner table, and what am I doing? I'm talking about capturing specific, clear goals because it's much more likely you'll do them if they're clear. Yeah. All right, let's keep going. The third one is this, is share your goals. When you share it with somebody else, you create accountability. I just shared that goal of mine with a whole bunch of people. And now, any one of you could come up and ask me next week, how you doing with that, Darrell? That whole mealtime thing. Are you annoying your wife? Are you annoying Liz? Come on. And some of you smart alecks are going to do it too. You're going to come up and say, it could happen. Dan's annoying his wife already. Here we go. Faithful friends. By the way, the Bible says faithful are the wounds of a friend. Oh, yeah. So when a good friend sometimes comes up and pokes you, right? They know when to cut you a little bit. They know when to kick you in the behind and say, no, you really need to do this. You really don't need to do that. That's a faithful friend. And so when you share it with somebody, it creates accountability. All right. So that's some recap. In fact, I've been forgetting to... I think you clicked something, Eric. Could you click back onto the... I'm not sure if you did or not, because it's not working now. Could you click through the PowerPoint for me, all right? Back on the easy version. Oh, there we go. Okay. Do I have it now? I do. Yes, that was my recap. Okay. All right, sorry. This is a day full of technical glitches. So number 3 was share your goal with someone. Now let's talk about tips to actually accomplish your goals, all right? Number 1, remember the gospel. Remember the gospel. Now you say, Darrell, what is this about? Well, let's look at 2 verses real quickly on your handout. Romans 16:25. Now to him who is able to establish you by my gospel and the proclamation of Jesus Christ. And then in 1 Corinthians 15:1, now brothers, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received and on which you have taken your stand. Yeah, all right. Established. That's what I'm looking for. Established, firm, solid, committed, standing, firm. That's what I want. Well, how does that happen? What makes us firm, solid, established? Is it our own grit and determination? No, not alone. Everybody knows you got to have grit and determination, right? But I want to encourage you as a Christian, as you're thinking about Christian goals, to remember the gospel along with grit and determination. And what do I mean by that? How many of you have ever been really, you've tried really hard to keep a goal in your life and you failed? Okay? We all have. The rest of you that didn't raise your hand, it just means you didn't raise your hand. That's all that means, because we've all done it. I've done it. God only knows how many times. You should go back and read my journal and see how many times have I said, I'm going to do this, and then I didn't. What is the difference maker when you started to do something and then you didn't? What is the immediate feeling that you get? Disappointment. What else? Guilt. Yeah. It just tends to weigh down on you, doesn't it? It just pushes down on you, and they're just like last time. I'll never get it. I'll never. And then you just kind of go, right? Forget it. Forget it. I guess I'll never be that person. You don't know how many times I have felt that way, and I've talked to other people who feel exactly like that because they try and it didn't work. So let me tell you, if you're going to accomplish your goals, you're going to have to remember the gospel, the good news of Jesus. This is the gospel, okay? The gospel is that Jesus Christ, through his sacrificial death in your place for your sin, and his resurrection from the dead, not only did he freely forgive you by faith, when you repent of sin and believe in him, not only did he freely forgive you, but now he lives within you, and through the power of his resurrection, he is transforming you to become the person you could not be on your own. That is the gospel. You are saved from sin, saved from hell, saved from yourself, and set free to be the person God wanted you to be. That's the good news. That's the gospel. Yeah. And if you haven't repented of sin and trusted in Jesus, you need to do that, because that's what it's all about. What did you do with the good news that God sent to you? What did you do with Jesus? So now, how does this, you say, Darrell, that's fine, but how does that apply to goals? Well, let me tell you. The moment you become a Christian, the moment you repent of sin and believe in Jesus, at that moment, you are accepted, loved, adopted into God's family. You are no longer a child of the devil. You are a child of the living God, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. It is a totally different thing, and that is the basis on which you can build self-esteem. If you try to build self-esteem just on how good you are and how many goals you accomplished and how much money you made and how many pounds you lost and whether or not you ate this many calories today, you're going to fail and feel like a miserable failure. I promise you, you will. Because sometimes things go south. But if you remember the gospel, then the next time you fail, it takes off the pressure. It takes off the judgment. It allows grace and forgiveness instead of judgment. You can come back to God and say, I blew that, Dad. What, you don't call God Dad? What? Did you know in the New Testament it says this? It says, He has sent forth His Spirit into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. And the reason, in the Greek culture, in the Roman culture that verse was written in, there was no word for daddy. There was only a word for father. They had a word for father, like biological dad. And so he said, but they didn't, and so they didn't translate it. They just left it in the Aramaic, in the Hebrew, Abba. Abba, Father. There was no word that corresponded with it. And so here's what I want to draw out of that for you. I had a professor who was fluent in Hebrew, and he went to Israel, and he traveled over there, and he said, I was riding on a public bus, and there came a little 2-year-old kid running up the aisle, and he was calling for his mom. He said, Ima, efo Abba? Mommy, where's Daddy? Where's Daddy? It's the 2-year-old. It's the Daddy. Now, if you remember the gospel and you mess up on a goal 1 day, 2 days, a week, guess what you can do? You come back and say, Daddy, I blew that. So get this. When you fall next time, you get up, you brush off the dirt, and you say, I am a forgiven, loved child of God. I will learn from this, get up, and try again, because God is building me into an established, standing firm child of His, but He's not waiting to love me until I get there. He's not waiting until you arrive to love Him. You're not earning the love of the Father at all. So if you will remember the gospel, it'll take away the self-hatred, the self-negative talk, the beating yourself up the day you failed. Oh, forget it. The whole thing. No. Get up and say, I am a forgiven, loved child of God. He is building me. I'm going to learn from this. I'm getting up and I'm going on because He's not waiting to love me until I arrive. He's not. Somebody say amen. All right. Margaret Thatcher said this. Said, you may have to fight a battle more than once to win it. It's a battle to grow. It is. It's a struggle and a battle to grow and become the person that God made you to be. And you may have to fight that battle more than once to win it. Get used to that idea. Love Margaret Thatcher. She's an amazing, amazing woman. The Iron Lady, the Prime Minister of, first female Prime Minister of Britain. And just a strong-willed, strong person. You may have to fight a battle more than once to win it. She did. And she fought it. And she won them too. All right. Yeah. Carrying on. Number 2. Build accountability into your schedule. Henry Cloud said this. He said that that your brain runs on glucose and relationship. And you need both of them to get where you're going. Okay. What's he saying? He's saying that your brain will short-circuit itself if you don't have somebody else in your life. It'll just kind of, it'll be easier to throw it all out the window if you don't have somebody else with you who does this journey with you. It's why if you put people in a group, they do better. Can anybody say Weight Watchers? Okay. Do you know the principle of the idea behind Weight Watchers? You know what happened? There was a woman who said she wanted to lose weight, and she tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and failed. And finally she said, I'm going to get 10 friends and we're going to do it together. And she succeeded. And she started a multi-million-dollar business out of it. Because she said, one of the secrets to winning is having a good plan and relationships. And guess what? It does work. You work the plan and the plan works, right? The same kind of thing could be said over and over and over again. By the way, spiritually, if you isolate yourself, you will die spiritually. I promise you. You will. You don't isolate yourself and say, I've sinned and I'm going to come over here, or I just don't feel like going to church today. I don't feel like being. No. You get with the people of God. If you feel down spiritually, that's not the moment to run from the people of God. It's the moment to run to the people of God. That's what needs to happen. You feel down, run toward God, run toward His people. You feel ashamed, don't run away from Him, run toward God, run toward His people. That's the moment we need each other in each other's lives. That's that moment. All right, build accountability into your schedule. By the way, there are actually some studies that say that telling someone your goal makes you less likely to achieve it. There's some studies that have said that. Basically what it is like this: the satisfaction of telling somebody this is what I'm going to do makes you feel like in your brain that you're already close to accomplishing it. Just check that off the list because I told somebody I was going to do it. And you got to check it off the list. And in some studies, it made people less likely to accomplish their goal. So here's the deal. If you tell someone, it's not enough to just tell them, this year I'm going to read the Bible through. No, that's not enough. In fact, if you don't know the answers to these two questions, you are much less likely to accomplish any goal that you set. You ready? Who am I accountable to for this goal? Who am I accountable to? If you know the answer to that question, and by the way, it's great to have yourself accountable to God. We're all accountable to God, right? We all are. But who, humanly speaking, are you accountable to? Okay, that's good, but it's not enough. It's not enough. Wife, okay, that's a good one. I would encourage you to also add somebody outside your wife, because let's be honest, they're really good. Mary is not negative. Stop it, Dan. All right. She's not, yeah. And don't make yourself accountable to your mother-in-law. That's true. Thank you, Dan. All right. Good practical advice from What am I saying? I'm saying, who are you going to make yourself accountable to? Yesterday, I called somebody, asked them if I could buy their lunch at Taco Bell because I'm a cheapskate. And I said, let's get together. And I sat down, I talked to him, and I said, would you be my accountability partner on some of my goals this year? And then I said, they said, well, yeah, I'll do that. I said, all right, when can we do that? What's a good time? If I check in with you, call you in the morning, stop by your place, what's a good time? What's a good time for that? And then I set an alarm in my phone. Why? Because, right here, if you don't know the answers to those two questions, you're much less likely to actually do anything any positive practical change in your life. Much less likely to do it. If you want to win, there. I've told you before the battle that I struggle with lust and pornography and all of that. If you want to win in those kind of areas, you will never do it fighting alone. I promise you, you will not. It won't happen. You know why? Because you shut it back in a dark corner of your heart, and it does not shrink in power, it grows in power. It grows and it'll make you sick. It will. You will not beat it just you and Jesus. Somebody else. God put you in a community like this on purpose. He did it on purpose because He knew you needed it to succeed. You needed it to be able to win. So I'm going to stop beating on that one. Let's move on to the next. Well, let me tell you, this is what we want to do, though. Superman doesn't need accountability. Superman never checks in with anyone to see if he's accomplishing his goals. Yes, and you're not him, okay? Because if you were, you would have accomplished last year's goals. If you're Superman, feel free to disregard point number 2. If you're not Superman, you'll need to do that, okay? You'll need to go ahead and take on point number 2. You'll need to take that on. If you're ready for something different this year, you need to be able to answer those 2 questions, all right? Number 3, learn the power of no. The power of no. Proverbs 4:25 says this, let your eyes look straight ahead, fix your gaze directly before you, make level paths for your feet, and take only ways that are firm. Do not swerve to the right or to the left, and keep your foot from evil. You want to win, you got to have that kind of focus. I'm not going left, I'm not going right, I'm looking straight ahead, I got blinders on. Right. Let me do something for you. This is just something I need to help you with, okay? Let me bust a myth for you. There's a myth contained in a phrase that we use all the time. I just can't find the time. Okay, how many of you have said that? And my hand's up, okay? You have said that phrase. Okay, can I just bust a myth for you in that nobody finds time? Nobody is walking along the street and like, oh, well, looky here. I just found 2 hours. Nobody does that. Nobody says, I had 30 minutes here somewhere. Is it under the cushions of the couch? Nobody finds time. You make time. You make time. You carve out time. You don't find it anywhere. You have the same amount every single day, and you carve out and make time for the things that you value. Okay? You make time. There are only 2 ways to do that. One is to become more efficient. Get what you're currently doing done faster. Okay? If it's taking you an hour to get ready in the morning, you could work faster and get it done in 30 minutes. So that's one way you could find time. Okay? If you're saying, I want to read the Bible every single morning and have some time with the Lord, then you're going to have to either get more efficient with your morning and make things happen faster. Or let's just say, let me just throw this out there for you, okay? Let's just say your goal was to make it to church on time. I'm just going to put this out there for you guys, all right? One of 2 things has to happen to do that. Dan said, you got to get remarried. That is not what I had in mind, all right? That is not at all what I had in mind. You're on time this morning, Dan. I don't know what you got a good one. Okay, all right. Well, there's only 2 ways to be able to accomplish something. I'm just trying to make it real this morning, okay? There's only 2 ways to do that. One of them is to become more efficient. You do your getting ready faster. Or 2, you got to cut something. That's what getting up earlier is, isn't it? It's cutting sleep, right? And you say, but I can't cut sleep. I'm already so exhausted. Then you have to cut something the night before. Yeah. There's something. Yeah. You know what like the number 1 enemy of quiet time with God is? It's like Friends reruns. Or Everybody Loves Raymond reruns or something. I don't know. No, seriously. Yeah, okay, I'm with you. Like, oh, seriously, you watch that? But it's something like that. It is, because it's late. Now, maybe it's David Letterman or whoever is on there now. Not Leno anymore. Who's the other guy? Fallon or late night. Letterman's still on. It's Fallon now. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So it's some of that kind of stuff. That is like the number 1 enemy of time with the Lord. Did you know that? It is, because you can't get up the next morning. You're exhausted. And you say, well, I can't cut sleep because I just can't drag myself out of bed. Well, then you're going to have to cut something the night before and go to bed early. There's only 2 ways to do it. If you want to make time for something, such as meeting with, not to drop names, but the God of the universe, If the president called, okay, maybe you're not a fan of the president. Okay, let me try again. All right, let me back up and try that one more time. One more run at this. If a millionaire called, Donald Trump called. Donald Trump calls and says, I'm going to be in your city, and I'd like to stop, and I'd like to have coffee with you for about a half hour in the morning and listen to some things. You could tell me some problems you'd like funding for. And I'd like to tell you some things that I've learned along the way in making millions of dollars on casinos. Real estate. Millions and millions. If he said that, you know what? I'd carve out the time. I'm not a huge Donald Trump fan, but I'd carve out the time because I'd like to talk to him. And he'd probably at the end of the coffee, he'd say, "You're fired." Anyway. All right. I would like to do that. The God of the universe has said to you and to me, if you'll stop by my place, I'd like to talk with you. Yes, please. Yes, please. I think I will. So if you're going to do that, you're not going to find time. You're never going to find time for prayer ever because you're not going to trip over an extra 30 minutes. The thing you're going to have to do is make time, and there's only two ways to do it. Either become more efficient or cut something out. There's only two ways. That's all. Everybody's got 24 hours per day. You can't make it 26. All right? Let's keep going. The power of no. How did I get off on that? All right, here we go. Life is incredibly distracting, isn't it? Yeah. It's hard to cut stuff. You know why? Because you have options. You have options. And you say, I don't have options. I really don't. I mean, I don't even do much. I just stay at home, pretty much. No, you have options. 100 years ago, people didn't even have electric lights. And so you know what happened when it got dark? They went to bed. Yeah, they went to bed. Like at this time of year, what time is it getting dark these days? 6? 5:30? 6? If you were going to stay up, you had to burn a candle, and you had to keep your candles for emergencies. Because candles, you had to either make them or buy them, and that'd get expensive. And so they just go to bed. That's what they did. But we have options, and they got up at 4 in the morning. That's true, yeah. We have options because we have electric lights and phones and smartphones and Facebook. You've got options. Craigslist. Oh, now, don't. I'll step on your toes. Don't you step on mine. All right, no. I'm joking. All right. What is it for you? What is it for you? For a long time, it was news sites for me. I really was. And so I blocked them. I blocked my two favorite ones. Blocked them. Yeah. But why? Because I had to cut something. Because, listen to me, because I care about my wife and my kids and my Jesus.
That's right, amen.
You have to. You don't have a choice. You've got options. You don't believe it? This is a quote. This is a quote from I think it's Wall Street Journal. Last month, 352 distinct types or sizes of toothpaste were sold at retail, down from 412 in August of 2008. 412 types of toothpaste? They all say whitening too, don't they? Like every one of them, they're all whitening. Have you noticed this? They're all, it's all of it. Here's what I'm saying. You've got options. The modern world has options like never before. Here we go. You've got options. It used to be milk and water if you had a cow. And mostly it was just water. And now you've got options all day long. So, how do you deal with good options? Because we got good options. We got lots of good options. With your time, there are many good things you could do. You could. When you stand up in the morning, there's a path. There's not one road or two roads. It's like 600 of them that you could choose. How do you decide? All right. You ready? Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 3. Nehemiah was he was the man who was responsible for rebuilding the wall around Jerusalem. Jerusalem's wall had been torn down and had been destroyed, and they broke the walls down, and he came back and he was responsible for coordinating the project of rebuilding the wall around this huge ancient city. So what he did, by the way, he had limited budget, limited manpower, and limited time. And so some influential men wrote him a letter. Some guys that were very influential in that part of the world wrote him a letter, and they said that they would like him to come to a meeting that they felt like was real important, that he be there. And here's what happened. On your handout, look at it, Nehemiah 6. He said this, I sent messengers to them with this reply, I am carrying on a great project, and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I come down and while I go down to you? And 4 times they sent me the same message, and each time I gave them the same answer. There you go. No, 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 no. The power of no. It simplifies. It simplifies. It does. It cuts out options. You don't have 600 options because I say no to all of them except the one that I want, right? You guys are looking at me like you're not really sure what planet I am from. Some of you are like, yeah, that's pretty much it. Number 4, ready? Here we go. Number 4, learn the power of no. Number 3, do many habits. M-I-N-I, many, not M-A-N-Y, many, but many habits. Oh, I forgot to give you that quote. Winston Churchill, you will never reach your destination if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks. That is so true. You got to say no. You got to say no to the opportunities to throw rocks at the dogs. Number 4, think many habits. M-I-N-I, many habits. I love this verse. By the way, this concept is a concept that I got, that I'm learning right now, and it's being helpful to me, from a book from Stephen Geist called Many Habits. And I'll briefly give you the nut, the little core of the book. Stephen Geist tried for years and years and years to do new habits in his life, like fitness and things like that. And one year, he said, I'm done with setting these huge goals. I'm going to set a goal to do 1 push-up every day. So he did, and while he was down there, he thought, I might as well do a few more. Just doing one's not going to help anything, so did a few more. And he said, a couple of days I forgot, and he said it was so freeing that all I had to do was, he said, literally, I turned over in bed, did 1 push-up, and laid down and went to sleep. Because he said, I kept my streak going. And normally, he said, I did a bunch more than 1. And he said, eventually, since I had an anchor that was there, and I didn't feel bad if I did, since I had an anchor that was there and every day I did those, he said, I worked it up till I was doing a half hour of exercise, because I started with something real small instead of setting this enormous goal. So what if you and I did many habits? Zechariah chapter 4, verse 9. The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundations of this temple, and his hands also will complete it. The prophet Zechariah says, then you will know that the Lord Almighty has sent me to you. And look at this verse. Some of you need to write this one down. Who despises the day of small beginnings? Who despises the day of small beginnings? You know what? A lot of people do. You're not ever going to do anything. You know what, my friend? I may not accomplish everything I set out to this year. I may not. But you give me 40 more years of life by the grace of God, if he's good to me. And by the grace of God, I'm going to become the man that God has called me to be. I will. And I may not conquer it all this year. Let me scratch that. I won't conquer everything this year. I know I won't. But you know what? I intend to conquer something. And I'm not going to despise the day of small beginnings, small things. I'm not going to despise that day. If this is a day of small things, I'm going to take it on. Some of you guys Some of you guys, you have some things in your life that you're looking at and you're saying, it's too big of a mountain. And you need to eat the elephant one bite at a time. That's how you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. You climb a mountain one step at a time. You conquer some things one step at a time. What if you, I really ought to ask for a show of hands, how many of you, think about this before you answer, okay? How many of you have never really been satisfied with the regularity of the time you spend with the Lord? Okay? Bible reading and prayer. How many of you have never been really satisfied with the regularity of the time that you spend with Him? Okay? Most of you. What if you said, I will spend 5 minutes a day. And then if I'm enjoying it, I'll spend a little more. If I'm not done with my prayer list, I'm going to keep a little prayer list. I'll just add things to it. And if I have to pray a little longer to get through everything, if I'm reading an extra long chapter, I'll read a little more that day. Because 5 minutes, I could go for 8, right? What if you just anchored it with 5 minutes and you didn't feel bad? If you forgot, you set yourself an alarm on your phone, you told somebody and asked them to check in with you once or twice a week and say, hey, you sticking with that? And you just bit off just what you could chew. Would it make a difference in 365 days? Would it make a difference in your walk with the Lord? Yeah. Oh no, I think it would. Really. Nobody's telling you to read the Bible for 45 minutes a day and pray for 2 hours. Nobody's doing that. You don't have to set that goal. What if you just said, I'm going to conquer the small goal. That's my plan. Let me tell you a story of a couple of guys. Adoniram Jensen was a missionary to Burma. At that time, one of the only English-speaking missionaries, Christian missionaries in the entire country of Burma. It was almost completely closed to Christianity. He went to Burma and he began studying the Burmese language because nobody had ever translated the Bible into the Burmese language. Now let me tell you, if you're learning a language well enough to speak it, that's challenging enough, right? It takes a little while. Not only was he going to do that, but he was going to learn it well enough to translate the scriptures. And you think it's hard to read the Bible, try translating the whole thing, right? It's going to monumental job to translate the whole Bible into a different language. And he said he was going to do it. 18 years he worked in Burma without a vacation or a furlough back to the States. 6 years without one single person becoming a Christian. Not one. Not one person converted to Christianity in the first 6 years he lived there. He was tortured, he was imprisoned, and he admitted that never one time did he ever see a ship sail without wanting to jump on board and go home with it. His wife's health broke. He put his wife on a vessel going home. He wrote in his diary, knowing that he would not see his wife for 2 years, he wrote in his diary, quote, "If we could just find some quiet resting place on earth where we could spend the rest of our days in peace." But then he wrote this, quote, "Life is short. Millions of Burmese are perishing and going to hell. I am almost the only person on earth who has attained their language enough to communicate the message of salvation." And he stayed. His goal was to translate the Bible and found a church of 100 members before his death. When he died, he left the Bible, 100 churches, and 8,000 members. Why? Because he just stayed. He had a big goal, big goal. One chapter at a time, one person at a time, one relationship at a time. And he did great things for God. Famous guy from the history of the Methodist Church. Francis Asbury. They called him the prophet of the long road. It's the only non-military horse equestrian statue in Washington. He was a preacher. He came to America from England, commissioned by John Wesley to spread the doctrines and the teachings of Methodism all over the United States, which was starting to expand westward. When Francis Asbury landed in America, there were 5 Methodist preachers and 500 Methodists in the whole country. 5 preachers and 500 Methodists in the whole country. 70 years later, well, I better tell you what he did first. Francis Asbury crisscrossed the Allegheny Mountains 60 times on horseback. He probably rode more miles on horseback than any human in history. Depending on who you ask, 300 to 400,000 miles on horseback. Going back and forth, crisscrossing, planting churches, overseeing pastors. He preached 60,400 sermons in 40 years of ministry. Do the math. 60,000 messages. His face, literally, was more recognizable than George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Because Washington and Jefferson were kind of localized, right? They were well known by name, but people didn't know their face. People knew Asbury. He wrote all over the place. He preached the gospel all over the place. He was more recognizable than the President of the United States. At 70 years old, his feet were so swollen they wouldn't fit in the stirrups anymore. They would tie him to his saddle and he would ride on to preach. 70 years from the day he arrived, 70 years later, there were 1 million Methodists in America. When he arrived, there were 500. 70 years later, there were 1 million. By 1860, the Methodist movement that he founded and coordinated in those first 40 years, the Methodist movement had been so successful that 1 in 3 Americans claimed to be Methodist by the year 1860. 1 in 3. Now, we've come a long ways, and a lot of things have changed since those days. And the Methodist Church is a shadow of what it used to be comparatively, and I'm talking about the mainline United Methodist Church. But let me tell you something. There's a story there that's a lot bigger than a denomination. There's a man. There's a man who said, I will take what God has given me to do, and I will do it to the hilt. And I will preach, and I will travel, and I'll take one day at a time, and I will live every day to the fullest extent that I can for Jesus Christ. You and I'm not saying you're going to ride 400,000 miles on horseback. I'm not saying that you're going to preach 60,000 times. But you know what? You can be faithful with what God's called you to do. You can be faithful to conquer the place He's called you to conquer. You can be faithful in the corner where you are to shine brightly, in the workplace where you are, in your family. You can be faithful. And God can accomplish more things than you would ever think possible from your life. Would you take goals and say, I will, by the grace of God, I'm going to accomplish something for God this year. Would you bow your heads with me and let's pray.